Well, good morning, everyone. I think before I go through my slides, what I'd like to do is just give you some context of why I'm here and why I'm doing this presentation on this subject. I guess 20 odd years ago, I joined an organization that's described quite habitually on the news as the spy center of Cheltenham. So 25 years ago, I joined GCHQ. And about 3 months ago, after a long career in this, I got interviewed by a lady from the Telegraph. So seeing the newspaper over there sort of reminded me of that. And she asked me, in your career, has anything changed? And the best example I could come up with was actually writing a simple thing like writing a document. I remember the first document I ever wrote, I actually wrote it using a pen and paper. And I took it down the corridor to a room where it was typed up and the result was given to me. I went through it, I edited it, long before you actually had a word processor. So that's 25 years ago that happened. But what then made me think was, why hadn't I picked a change in security as an example? Why did I pick the word processor? And I began to think that actually, how we were doing security in a really top level way back then is actually very similar to how we do it today. Everything gets a stamp of authority, everything's regulated, everything's on compliance, and it isn't actually like most other things that are measured and checked and viewed to see if it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that was one of the reasons why I did this presentation. Then another hat that I wear in Quintiq that I think Reese gave me a plug for this morning was that I actually sit as the head of research for machine learning and autonomous computing in Quintiq as well. And I begin to think about, actually, if that's 25 years ago how I wrote a document, what is it going to be like in 5 to 10 years' time on digital augmentation of the human? We're already all wearing watches. I've got 2 mobile phones on me to help me do my job. I've got a laptop over there. I've got all of this stuff. How is that going to be integrated in 5 or 10 years' time? And how is that actually, how do you make that stuff secure? What does security mean in that type of world? So I guess the presentation today is just a few examples and ideas of how it is today and a couple of the trends of how it's changing, just to give food for thought, and then I'll open up the room for a little bit of discussion and questions at the end. I know time is short, so I will try not to ramble on too long. So, as I said, my agenda today is who is Quintiq, because people have never heard of us. Context, some example certifications, so some of the things that happen today, some metrification that's happening. Are we actually market or government driven as a profession? And then I'll open it up to discussion. So who is Quintiq? So this is a standard slide that we use, because unlike most organizations, we don't make a lot. We actually do a lot of technical knowledge and expertise, mainly, I guess, historically in the defense sector, but we do operate, and certainly in the security realm, we tend to operate for people where they're less worried about compliance and actually more worried about reputation and security. And the level of customer that we have in the security world, usually for an organization, I can't refer to them in public. I can't actually say who they are, and I can't do it. But we do things such as host websites for some really large organizations that I'm not allowed to discuss. And we do things across the whole life cycle. So some of the things that was talked about in the panel this morning is really interesting. How do you actually do this stuff? And people say to me, well, what relevance does the defense sector have into the rest of industry? It doesn't have that pace. it doesn't have that issue. Tell that to the soldier who's stuck in Afghanistan as a missile is hammering towards a site and he's got 2 seconds to get out of the way, and tell me that isn't pace. Because I think it is. So in reality, I think the defence industry does know a fair bit about pace. So a little bit of context. Here's an example, cyber chain. So this is all about the things that people try to do to make things happen. So everyone's trying to prevent cyber events. We've all done it. We've all built architectures. We've all employed firewalls. Most people's houses have got a firewall in them. Most people don't even look at it. It's part of the hub that you get from your IP, your internet provider. Most people don't change the password. Most people don't even look to see what comes into it. And I think I did a survey of a lot of master's students on a cyber degree, and only one of them had actually looked at the logs, which tells you how people actually apply security in their lives. So, having not prevented this for various reasons, the next thing we try to do as an industry is we try and detect. We try and detect when someone's actually breached that boundary. Various ways of doing that. We look and find it. The industry average at the minute, the industry mean for detecting someone is, depending on which source you look at, is in the order of 150 to 200 days. After someone's been on your network for 200 days, they've generally done a fair bit of damage. And if they're clever, you won't know what it is because they'll have encrypted everything they took away anyway. So we then do investigations to find out what's happened as best we can. We then react. We then do a response. We then build a defense. We then try and improve it. And if we're really clever, we then start to use things like threat intelligence to try and predict what might happen next. So that's, in general, how the cyber industry works as we speak. Now, assuming you do some of that, what you then can get is you can be certified. Now, there's various certifications out there, and different industries have different certifications to say that you're compliant and secure. And I guess depending on whether you're a big company or a small company and how much you're willing to spend, there's different ones. So 2 examples I have here are probably the ISO standard, ISO 27001. Everyone's heard of it. It actually originated from a British standard, and if you trace it back far enough, it actually comes from something wrote in the early 80s by the American Department of Defense, which was called the Orange Book. So it's had a long history and a long piece of pulling it together, and it gives you a view of how to govern security in your organization. I guess there's 2 issues with that. One is it's a bit tick boxy, so it's a bit like the MOT, and the other thing is it's actually expensive for people to achieve and maintain, even though it probably doesn't give you that much security value. So there's other alternatives out there, and one that I've used here is the IASME consortium, and IASME stands for Information Assurance for Small and Medium Enterprises. And what they're trying to do is take some of the aspects of 27001 and try and tailor it for smaller organizations to make that barrier to entry cheaper for organizations to prove that they at least do something in the cyber arena. So these are the things that are out there. Another piece that's happened is government have got involved. Government have decreed that if you're to do business with them, you have to prove you're cyber secure. And they've come up with a cyber essentials scheme. And the idea is that all industries in the UK will sign up to this, and they will be able to prove that they have got a basic area of cyber defense. When I spoke to the government organisation that does it, they've got less than 2,000 companies in the UK signed up to this. So there is not a huge proportion of organisations bought into this. And what does it actually mean when you've got it, and how does it actually prevent you actually being hacked? Are the two questions that I'd ask. So then I began trawling around, and I guess one of the things we do is in our service provision, and something we always get asked is, we know we come to you because we want to be secure, but how do we know you're good? And I actually begin to think about this and I think, that's actually quite tricky to prove. How do you, because it's really difficult to prove a negative.